I thought when Notre Dame went on that, 18 play, whatever amount, 10 minutes, I'm like, they're going to try to bully this game, which is what maybe we thought they would have to do. And I was like, my God, this is impressive. Ohio State didn't blink. They had 2 or 3 75-yard drives. But, it got to the point where it almost became a blowout. Notre Dame hung around, but there was the best football team in Ohio State.
Yeah, and look, they had the best roster all year long, and we kind of knew that going into the season. I did a top 5 last year before the season, saying like he's kind of out of excuses when it comes to talent. He changed the quarterback, he changed the offensive coordinator. You add Caleb Downs, you add all these guys, Seth McLaughlin, Quinshon Judkins. You have the deepest team in the country, and they suffered through offensive line and all that stuff and came out on top. I genuinely thought, like, okay, Marcus Freeman has this thing game planned out right. First thing they're going to do is just pound it down the field, eat up clock when you've got a big explosive offense like Ohio State, and you're not really that in Notre Dame. The only way you can combat it is taking large swaths of time away. The problem is that your defense, which has been absolutely stellar all year long, responded 3 minutes later by not being that. And Ohio State just goes and scores. Notre Dame gets the ball back. They don't even have it for like 2-3 minutes.
Yeah.
Ohio State gets it again. It's 14-7. It was on.
Yeah, like 2 drives minus 4 yards after they had taken that 7-0 lead. Ohio State was fantastic. My concern about Notre Dame was, would they have enough firepower? And Ohio State, if it's not Henderson or it's not Jeremiah Smith or it's not Egbuka, it is who?
Oh, Quinshon Judkins.
Judkins, who had 3 touchdowns last night. The Ole Miss transfer, he was fantastic. Craig?
Yeah, congratulations to the Ohio State Buckeyes on winning the national championship, bringing this college football season to a close. Congrats to Notre Dame on an incredible year, a terrific run in the postseason, and certainly nothing to hang their heads about. And they'll be around, and we'll likely see this matchup again in the years to come. But I thought it was a pretty big letdown. Ultimately, let's just be honest about it. As far as a competitive game, it was not what you were hoping for, especially with the big stage and the platform of having it, all to yourself this Monday night. And I just thought that was unfortunate, and it inevitably led to a lot of midway through the game overreactions, probably from many of the same who were panties in a wad after the first round of the playoffs. Like, they just pop out, man. Like, the first sign the game might go sideways, they're like, see? The sport's doomed. It's like, I saw somebody mention this yesterday. There's a bunch of people covering college football that don't seem to like college football.
Yeah.
And I could not agree more. And I know at times I don't always agree with everything, like in terms of the sport, and I don't like everything about the sport these days, or there's things that I feel like could be better, or there's things that could be tweaked and improved upon and all of that. But I also understand there's been a lot thrown at fans the last few years, from transfer portal, expanded playoff, NIL, like all of these different things that have gone on. And so that's why I periodically ask the question, like, temperature checked on you guys, like the fandom, and not only your own, but kind of like worldwide. What do you feel from the college football fans out there? And so, yeah, when that game started to get a little sideways, you saw all the negative Nellies start popping their heads out like Punxsutawney Phil on Groundhog Day, just ready to rip the playoff and rip the sport and do whatever. And fortunately, that game turned a little bit, at least gave us a glimmer at the end of like, okay, maybe this can turn into something. Maybe this will make people look really dumb, like if Notre Dame comes storming back, but just never made it close enough to feel all that important or that competitive. Ohio State's got the roster that was put together with millions upon millions of dollars, and Notre Dame does as well. But Ohio State in particular was highlighted as the most talented team from day number one of this whole season. And at the end, standing tall as the national champs, I think they proved that. I think they showed that. And, they, obviously deserve to be the national champs. I am curious, though, to hear, as much as I'm kind of highlighting criticism, I'm more or less kind of poking fun at, like, how much people who cover it seem to hate it, and also how quick we are to like call something a failure or like turn on it. And it's like, dude, it's midway through the first quarter. Like, Notre Dame, it's 7-0. It's kind of like the Ohio State, the last game against Texas, where it's like they were up as maybe like 1 or 2 scores, and you already thought the game was over based on the announcers.
Yeah, it was 21-7, I think it was. Yeah,
I felt like it was even before they got to 21.
Well,
but
it was 7-7. Oh, it doesn't matter.
I'm talking about when the announcer started saying, like, this game's pretty much over. It's like, dude, it's 14-7. Yeah. So, I don't know. I was not entertained by the game, guys, so I more or less kind of got mesmerized in between the big moments by, like, the pessimism and kind of the just overall sort of agitation I felt surrounding that game.
Yeah, there seems to, well, that's what social media brings to the table.
You're right.
You know, I'm the one that normally has to be reminded of that, but I wanted it to be a fun, competitive game. It was for a little bit, and then Ohio State was just better, period. It doesn't mean anything other than they're the best football team. Think about this. Ohio State now has reeled off wins against Tennessee, Oregon, Texas, and Notre Dame after the loss to Michigan. And they will turn around and open up against Texas next year. So that's an amazing 4-game stretch and a 5-game stretch with the Horns in Columbus next year, who both are being ranked 1 and 2, depending on which gambling site you go to on who's the favorite to win it next year, which we will get to at some point.
Well, trying to pick the favorite for next year and what everything's going to be is like a fool's errand.
No, it's not, though. I get what you're saying. I'm not disagreeing with you. I just know that it's going to be just like the AP Top 25 poll in August next year is going to be pretty much 7 to 12 teams,
But trying to, like, if you really want to do it right, just admit that you won't know because. Yeah.
Buddy, anybody doing a top 25 and dropping today is doing it for purely content and not to be accurate. Like, let's be honest about the situation.
So let's look at that. I'm just kidding.
But look, let's just look at Ohio State and Texas, the teams that were the two most talented rosters. We talked about Texas at length. They're losing 20 guys. 20 guys. That's a lot. Now, they can have faith in the guys that they have, and they have faith that Arch Manning's going to be a star and that they've got good wide receivers and running backs, and they've got Ryan Wingo, and they've got all this. But none of these guys have been in the starting lineup for 12 games, okay? Ohio State, they kept that whole defense intact and added Caleb Downs. Essentially, next year, that defense is Caleb Downs and 10 new dudes. The offense is Julian Sand, Jeremiah Smith, and Carnell Tate and new dudes. So, and Julian Sand's not started. He was just the number 1 quarterback last year. So, pretending like you think it's just going to be like it was when these teams rolled it back again, it's different now.
Well, it is different now, and of course, the transfer portal can make a team you think is pretty good even better. So, but let's get to what we
talk
saw
about
last
what just
night,
happened.
Yeah. Ryan Day's resume. This is a guy under amazing fire the last 4 years. Couldn't beat Michigan. This year, lost at home to Michigan. Couldn't score more than 10 points, Michigan. And then what one win, a national title, does to a resume. It's amazing. It's like what it does to a head coach in the NFL, a Super Bowl. 67-10, 1 national title, 2 title appearances, 4 trips to the college football playoff, 2 Big Ten titles, 6 consecutive AP top 10 finishes, which we seem to take for granted because of some schools or what they do, 6 straight top 7 recruiting classes. That's from Chris Hummer. He'll join us later in the week. What a resume, just with now adding a national title. It was already pretty damn good.
Yeah. And I think when we talk about last night and we get back to that a little bit, I do think just the general conversation I was kind of trying to eventually allude to in my rambling was about the playoff itself and kind of like the feeling around it. And I think that's a worthy debate to have about, like, as we've had before, the structure of it and how it ended, because the middle was great, right? The beginning sucked for a lot of people. The middle was great. The ending, not so good. So I think we could talk about the playoff and the format and reflect on that a little bit. But in terms of that graphic, like, who's that for? Y'all know who that graphic's for? That's for Ohio State fans. Nobody else thinks Ryan Day should be fired. Nobody else was sitting there going like, this dude lost to Michigan again? Throw his ass on the streets. That graphic is solely and only for Ohio State fans. Now, if it's to just show everybody else what he's accomplished, hey, like me or Paul or whoever, like, we can all look at that and go, damn, that's pretty impressive. And it is. It's very impressive. It's a great resume. It's a better resume than a lot of coaches out there, past and present. He's a really good head coach. He's had stumbles, and because of where he is and who he is and all of that comes with it, it's magnified times 100. But I don't need to see that to know he's great. I don't need to see that to know that Ohio State's one of the top teams obviously right now the top team in the entire country. But for some reason, Ohio State fans need to see that to be reminded of what they have, and yet it's still not good enough. So last night, part of me was happy for them, and another part of me is going, you don't deserve it. Like, the moment he loses again, you're going to be like, boo, get the hell out of here. And so that's where I was torn, was like, I don't think the fan base deserves Ryan Day in so many ways.
No, look, if this was any previous incarnation of the postseason, he is either fired at the end of the year for losing to Michigan again because he's ruined the season, they can't win the national title, all their hopes are dashed. Or, number two, he goes into an offseason where it's win the national title or else, and then there's no way to get out of it. There's no way to prove that, yeah, everybody has bad days. Michigan has my number right now. Give me a second, I'll get it figured out. But I've only lost 10 games. 3 of them are to Michigan. The others are scattershot around a who's who of college football. The worst team he's ever lost to is Missouri. The worst team he's ever lost to is Missouri.
Beat 4 straight top 10 all-time programs to win a national title, dude. What are we talking about?
Yeah, so let's not let me just put everything. That's what the fan base needs to know. Like, yes, we know the Michigan game is super important. It's the big rivalry game. But you are in a new world now where it is not the end of the world if you lose it, provided you didn't suck the whole rest of the year. If you were elite the entire rest of the year, which they were, you can go ahead, clear your throat, take a shower, and get back to work. And that's what they did. And now you don't have to maybe stress out about if a Michigan game with the crappiest quarterback they've had in 25 years goes the wrong way and your season's over.
They just beat number 9, number 1, who had beaten them by 1, number 5, and number 7.
And I will correct, Oregon's not a top 10 all-time team, but y'all know what point I'm making here. I mean,
they
beat
were the number
Tennessee.
1 seed in the whole thing.
Yeah,
too.
no. I'm clarifying there for like the one guy who's like, well, technically.
Yeah.
But yeah, it was a hell of a run. It was an all-time run, and Ryan Day deserves to be rewarded. And I know the moment he loses to like Penn State or to Michigan again, all of this won't matter. It'll be like blank slate. But I think that's just where we get into goofy territory, quite honestly, and we need to stop feeding the Ohio State fans that think that they deserve more than what they're getting, because it's asinine, and it's just a little strange, honestly.
They only have double-digit national titles, or is it 8? Hold on. They also beat number 3 Penn State. They beat number 5 at the time Indiana. This is an all-time run. It doesn't mean they're the best team of all time. It doesn't have to be. But this year, they proved, despite the loss, Oregon by 1 on the road, and then the game against Michigan. This is a great football team, and they won the national title. Congratulations.
So I have a really good friend who's a Chiefs fan, and we have a group chat of some of the guys we used to run around in Waco back in the old days here. And he, during the game the other day, he was – oh crap! Here goes Andy Reid doing his cute stuff again. And my next response is like, Kyle, we all love you, but kindly shut up. You have no room to complain about any coaching decision Andy Reid makes. It's the same thing for Ohio State fans. Like now, next year, if they're like, oh, here goes Day doing this again. Buddy, go to the athletic center, walk in front of the trophy case, and look at the date on that. Yeah. It's 2024, so don't complain.
He just won more hardware in a postseason than some coaches win their entire career.
All right, here's a note, and this was something that they were incredible at. Texas fans can relate to this. 25 times teams have gone first and goal. That could be from the 9 or the 10 or the 4. The 9th time in 25 attempts, somebody's been first and goal against Ohio State and came away, not with allowing a field goal, but nothing, including the drive that ended the Texas game on the strip scoop score by Sawyer. That's crazy good. Not a single point. And, of course, Notre Dame did not score and had another first and goal, too.
All right, now the big question for Ohio State is the guy who coached all that, is he living in Columbus, Ohio, or Norman, Oklahoma next year?
Yeah, with Knowles, Jim Knowles, who has a great – and there have been times, remember, when Jim Knowles has been questioned about his football IQ and coaching. How about this note? I was stunned by this. I'm old enough to know a lot about the history of the conferences and whatever, and I know what the certain conferences have done lately, including the SEC. this back-to-back, Michigan and then Ohio State, it's the first back-to-back Big Ten consensus national championships since the days of Bubba frickin' Smith and Michigan State in 1965 and 66. Nebraska, in parentheses, Chris Vanini, they won it 94, 95, 97. Doesn't count. They were a part of the Big 12. That is stunning. And they're only getting deeper and better with the new schools that joined the conference that added to what they had already.
Yeah, and maybe we've seen a changing of the guard temporarily. Maybe next year another rando team wins. I said it's not rando, but like Michigan, Ohio State. Maybe it's another Big Ten team. Maybe Oregon finally gets it done. But I do think that we're in an era where we're not going to see the same teams because of the 12-team playoff. All you have to do is have one bad day, one key injury, and you're playing against another elite team, and they can exploit that better. And look, we saw some blowouts. We also saw some really close games. Texas isn't in the semifinals if calls on the field go a certain way, right? I mean, then I know that's a complaint about the officials, but that's how close games are. That you get a big call, you can win the game because of that. So in this era where there's not so much distance. I mean, there's still some, but there's not gigantic cavernous gaps like there were before. Who knows what can happen?
By the way, the Michigan State, that second year, 1 second, Craig, it was not even an AP of the UPI. It was the National Football Foundation, which even almost makes that. Yeah, they were back-to-back national titles, but not since then. That's 60 years ago, basically, until what we saw the last 2 years. Craig?
Yeah, I mean, I think we got the point. It's been a long time, and I don't know. I feel like it's cool. It's a cool mark for the Big Ten. I also think it's partly due to the era that we're in. They are benefiting as greatly as anybody from the ability to have more money than anybody and the ability to spend that money. And so what we've seen is a game that's been rigged up now where what was maybe a 5% chance that a TCU or an Iowa State or somebody like that could ever win a national championship, that is now 0. And if it's not 0, it's 0.0001. And the only thing that gives it that 0.0001 is that if somehow some oil tycoon like Texas Tech's boy or something decides, like, I'm spending $1 billion on the roster this year and we're buying a national championship. Barring that, like, yeah, it's going to be the Big Ten and the SEC schools pretty much every single year, and the ACC for as long as they are the way that they are. And, I just think that that's going to be a big part of – we're going to hear a lot about Big Ten titles and SEC titles and stuff moving forward more than we ever did previously, because I think it's just it all suits them. But for the Big Ten, that is a long time. You wouldn't have thought it had been that long. But for a while there, I mean, Ohio State's kind of carried the conference. I mean, Oregon gave them an influx, but that was just this year. I mean, Michigan's been good to pretty good, but, I mean, we just watched TCU beat them a few years ago in the playoffs, right? Then Harbaugh gets over the hump.
3 years ago.
Harbaugh gets over the hump and does so with, I don't know, a pretty big story riding alongside of it about this Connor Stallions guy and all of that. But, like the Big Ten has kind of been in the back seat compared to the SEC, but flaunting as much and talking about its history as much and making as much money and doing all those things. So, yeah, you would have thought they'd maybe flex their muscle back-to-back years prior or sooner than that. But, yeah, it's been a very long time. And I just think kind of where I started off with this, I think that this is the last time we read a graphic like that. I think it's going to become pretty commonplace now because Ohio State's not going to stop spending money. Michigan's not going to sit on their hands now. I mean, and look at them. They won a national title. What happened the very next year? They beat Ohio State. Hell yeah, buddy. And then Ohio State wins a national title. So, like, they've already taken back the aura, if you will. Oregon's not going to stop spending money. So, I think the Big Ten's just getting started, really, because they, like the SEC, will benefit as greatly, if not even more greatly, than anybody from the era that we're in right now. So get used to it. I'm afraid and if you don't like it, I'm afraid that's something you're going to have to get used to probably.
By the way, the Big Ten, and during my heyday as far as young and understanding and being a part of college football, the USC owned basically the Pac-12. Occasionally it was UCLA, Stanford, Washington, whoever. But there were teams ranked number 1 in the Big Ten that would go into the Rose Bowl and come out with a loss. It happens. It happens in the Orange Bowl. It would happen in the Sugar Bowl or the Cotton Bowl, whatever. But that happened quite a bit to the teams out of the Big Ten, the Ohio State-Michigan run, where they played in every Big 12. They played in every Rose Bowl game from 1969 through 1981. And there were teams that went in to have a chance to win a national title. Some were able to at least finish in the top 5, but some that did not get a chance to finish it off. Michigan, Ohio State, great run for the Big Ten, not over. Next year, we put this to sleep and start all over again. Will Howard, it's a great story. Shihan Jeyarajah is going to join us in about, I'd say 5 minutes or so. He was at the game. But I want to put this up because I saw this and went, oh, my God. I almost forgot part of this story. Will Howard in 2020, Shahan saw him play for the first time. He was stuck behind Skylar Thompson. They then added K-State Adrian Martinez out of Nebraska. They then recruited Avery Johnson, and he went to Ohio State after always having somebody around him. And he was pretty good at times at Kansas State, really good, and now he wins the national title. Good for him, showing resiliency and a tremendous drive to win the game, to win a national title. Ohio State's not done. They are loading up. You saw the stat, 7 consecutive, top 7, is that right? No, recruiting classes. They do lose Devin Brown. He's headed to Cal, quarterback, leaving to go play for the Cal Golden Bears.
Yeah, I like that pickup for Cal. Devin Brown was someone who, really he was a very highly recruited player, but was constantly just, 1 star below the guy who was on the roster ahead of him, whether it was Kyle McCord a year ago or Will Howard brought in specifically to start, but a guy who stuck it out and was there last night. He's getting his ring and is now going to get a chance to start for a couple years at Cal. I wish him the best. And the other thing I think is awesome about Devin Brown, he wears number 33. He's trying to start the old school quarterback. Like, let's get back to Doug Flutie 22s. Bernie Kosar wore 20 when he was at Miami. I'm all for quarterbacks wearing numbers in the 20s and 30s and even 40s. Maybe an 88 at quarterback. I don't know. Just wear cooler numbers to me. Yeah. Let's go old school.
By the way, Craig, before you respond,